please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
James Medwena.
Present.
Keith Brown.
Here.
Daniel Stoddard.
Here.
Jeffrey Stamp.
Present.
Chairman Herrera.
Present.
Dennis Trujillo.
Here. Next on the agenda, we have approval of the agenda. Prior to approving the agenda, pursuant to planning and zoning rules of procedure, resolution number 1-23-18.6, section 2, I would like to temporarily suspend the rules regarding the length of public comment and limit each person's comment to 2 minutes per person, and to require every person who wishes to speak to sign up to do so. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Griffin, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Medwena.
Present.
No, it's for the motion.
Oh, yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Yes.
Commissioner Stoddard.
Yes.
Commissioner Stamp.
Yes.
Commissioner Herrera.
Yes.
Commissioner Trujillo.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. I think this would be a good time for, there's a lot of questions concerning why there are four ordinances. I thought that Attorney Howard could clear that up.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner members, at your last meeting in August, the Commission approved 3 ordinances to be considered tonight to be forwarded to the full Board of County Commissioners. At that last meeting, there was confusion as to one ordinance, the two non-citizen working group ordinance was the words block and baseline were interchanged, but the final vote at the end of the meeting for to be placed on the agenda for tonight included 2 citizen working groups, one from the Science Committee and one from the Ordinance Committee, and the block ordinance draft. Because there was somewhat confusion at that last meeting, the agenda included both the baseline and the block there, but the final vote that was taken by this commission at the last meeting were only the 3 draft ordinances. So that's what's before you.
Any questions, Commissioner? Thank you, Ms. Sankey. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda then?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Griffin, could you please call the roll for the agenda approval?
Commissioner Medwena.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Yes.
Commissioner Stoddard.
Yes.
Commissioner Stamp.
Yes.
Commissioner Herrera.
Yes.
Commissioner Trujillo.
Yes. Motion passes. Okay, next on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look those over? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
Ms. Griffin?
Commissioner Medwena.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Yes.
Commissioner Stoddard.
Yes.
Commissioner Stamp.
Yes.
Commissioner Herrera.
Yes.
Commissioner Trujillo.
Yes.
Okay. Next, we move to, motion passes. Next, we move to the government-to-government communications, representative of local tribals and/or tribal governments were given the opportunity to make comments regarding proposed oil and gas ordinances. Do we have a list?
Comment.
Could you read the
Yes.
first, please?
Michael Sandoval with the Pueblo of San Felipe.
It is.
Good evening. Chairman Herrera and Commissioners, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Michael T. Sandoval. I'm here representing our Governor, Anthony Ortiz, as a tribal council member for the people of San Felipe. In December of last year, Sandoval County Commissioners handily defeated what was known as the Starter Ordinance, which Commissioner Block could not vote for because it was filled with loopholes. Now the Commissioner has changed his mind. Instead, Commissioner Block has reintroduced the dusted-off Starter Ordinance with a few changes. Since April of this year, the County Commissioners appointed a Citizens Working Group, which has spent thousands of volunteer hours working on the ordinance. There is now 3 other ordinances that are up for consideration. I ask you, Commissioners, is that right? To consider the others? If there was a clear and direction of action from the Commissioners, the County Commissioners. It is important to remember the County Commissioners clearly decided that it was time to try for a new approach. However, there is nothing in the approved CWG charter that authorizes the P&Z Commission to consider anything other than the CWG ordinance. This was This is what Commissioner Block originally agreed to, which he is now circumventing. The CWG ordinance have clear, precise, strong provisions that protect our drinking water, our roads, our archaeological treasures, and thus provide for public and tribal consultation. So why is Commissioner Block introducing the once defeated starter ordinance as his own as the Block ordinance, where there is clear examples of what's wrong with it? And they are as follows. A road plan is in question. Who pays for maintenance and damages? Hazard waste and spills. How does the applicant deal with that? Noise provisions. What process will be used? And then finally, the aquifer protection, which is a key issue for the county. Just to name a few, what is Commissioner Block thinking? Surely residents of our county deserve strong protections that his ordinance fails to guarantee. In conclusion, we are asking you, the Planning and Zoning Commission, to reject the Block ordinance, which is basically the starter ordinance, which has been shown to be flawed. The science team ordinance and the so-called baseline ordinance, we are also requesting for it to be considered. We are requesting that you fulfill the mandate and send the CWG ordinance to the county commissioners as the baseline ordinance. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Lieutenant Governor Scott Paisano, Pueblo of Sandia.
Commissioners, Mr. Chairman, good evening. Thank you for having me this evening and allowing me to speak before you. It's an honor and a pleasure. My name is Scott Paisano, Lieutenant Governor for the Pueblo of Sandia, representing Governor Bernal and the Pueblo. The Pueblos sent over our concerns via writing, and I believe you are the recipient of that letter addressing our concerns. I'm here today to reiterate those concerns regarding a couple of issues, primarily pertaining to the environmental impacts of our Pueblo, our community, and the surrounding communities at large. Concerning the environmental impacts, including...
Can you speak in the mic?
Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Again, our concerns are the environmental impacts, including the water contamination. To reiterate what our letter has indicated, the Pueblo has some serious concerns with the type of the water use and the reinjection into the wells as a result of fracking. The Pueblo does have its own water quality standards, which are of concern, and to maintain the health and safety of our people and the surrounding communities, we'd like to reiterate those standards to the Commission. I believe those are detailed in the letter as well. Concerned with the final ordinance and making sure that it undergoes a substantive and meaningful consultation with the tribes, particularly the Pueblo of Sandoval. Concerned about the tribal setbacks identified in some of the proposed ordinances and the ability for that meaningful opportunity to consult and participate in the application process for any wells and drilling. Our letter indicates the Pueblo opposes fracking, and as it was previously mentioned by the tribal leader, is we will hope that the Commission does rely on the scientific evidence that fracking has produced throughout the nation, throughout the country, and its impacts in local and the local water quality standards, and its impacts on local health and safety of the residents. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor Torres from Town of Bernalillo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, appreciate the opportunity. I just want to, start by saying that I'm mayor of the town of Bernalillo. I've been doing it for I'm in my third term now. Grew up in Bernalillo, and probably like many of you have generations here. And I think more importantly than being mayor of the town is the fact that I'm a father and a grandfather. And I think in this instance, that's part of what we all need to look at, is not just the impacts today, but the impacts on future generations. I think if there's one thing that I can leave you with, it's an old saying. It was true thousands of years ago. It's certainly true today, and that's el agua es vida. Water is life. And I think more than anything, this ordinance is about water. The town, myself included, strongly supports economic development. We support it when it's done well. And I think there's a very important distinction between the notion that economic development is good versus the fact that not all economic development is necessarily good. And we have to be really careful how we move our communities forward. Bernalillo has been very fortunate over the last several years with our economic development, and it's something that we take very seriously and move forward with very carefully, and just don't open our doors to anything or anybody. And I would hope that Sandoval County will take that same approach. We absolutely stand opposed to the unconventional drilling, fracking, whatever you want to call it, particularly in our part of the county. You all have seen, I'm sure, the geology just like we have, and that Rio Grande aquifer that serves 800,000 of us in the middle of the state could certainly be impacted. And I can't think of any reason economically or otherwise that we would put that at risk, that you would put that at risk. So that's item number one. We also stand adamantly opposed to any permissive use. It's just too risky a business to allow administrative laws to go over things, move things forward on a fast track just for the sake of drilling. We feel that all permits need to go through an open public process. There should be adequate notice and the ability for the community to comment, because that's who all of us serve as elected officials, as our communities. We hope that whatever ordinance you guys move forward has adequate health and safety precautions. And again, I know you've all read these, so I won't go through each one page by page because that doesn't make any sense. But for us, that's what's most important, is the health and safety of our communities. Again, when I look at why I was elected, why any of us are elected, that's our number one cause, our number one call, our number one charter. Protect our communities, protect the health, protect the safety of our communities. And by that I mean specifically our cultural resources, our water resources, our environment. We want to be sure that your ordinance has adequate precautions for public safety. Things like roads, emergency services. We've talked to our staff about what might happen if there was drilling close and our EMTs or fire department would have to respond. And right now, we simply just don't have the resources to do that. And I strongly feel that the county wouldn't be able to respond to some sort of emergency like that today. And if they can't do it today, the county tells us they're in tough shape financially, how are they going to do it tomorrow? I think there also have to be very clear requirements in terms of the fiduciary responsibilities. It scares me to death to think about a company that might come and drill, leave a mess, whether it be contamination, whether it be the situation that they have, the sink well they have out in Carlsbad, and walk away from us, and we get stuck holding the bill. And all of a sudden, this economic development plan becomes an economic drain on our county coffers. That has to be included in the ordinance. Again, I think our job is to look at the what-if scenarios. It's fantastic to have jobs, it's fantastic to have economic development, it's fantastic to have revenue for the state, but it's also incumbent upon all of us to look at the what-if, the worst-case scenarios, and how we might be protected moving forward. I think there has to be a very clear delineation of oversight and who pays for it. It's great to say you're going to have oversight, it's great to say that we'll watch things, but who's going to pay for that? And again, what I've heard from our county commissioners repeatedly is the tough situation our county is in right now, and I believe them. The other thing is there has to be appropriate fines for violations. Right now, if you look at what the state has done over the last several years, it's frankly an embarrassment that if there are violations, the fines are so weak. It really is an embarrassment to our state. I think it's critical that you take and move forward an ordinance that's based on science. Sure, economic development is important, but what are the facts? And again, that's why we're so concerned that there be no fracking allowed in our part of the county. Again, I don't want to sound redundant, but our primary responsibility, and I mean all of us jointly, is protecting our citizens, protecting our environment, not just for today. Again, a job is terrific today, but what are we going to leave to our grandchildren? And I ask you to consider that as you move forward and make sure that we have an ordinance that protects all of us today and going into the future. And again, I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
That's the end of the government to government list.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 7, amending ordinance number 10-11-18.7A, comprehensive zoning ordinance of Sandoval County for the surface land regulation of oil and gas activities. First, we will need a motion to put the matter on the table for consideration. So,
Chairman, I'd like to make the motion per our previous discussions that we submit, as it's listed here in the agenda, A and C, and I believe B and D are the same, that we submit all those on up to the county commissioners for consideration.
can I get a second?
I'll second that so we can start discussion.
Okay, with the second, then we can go ahead and get public comment. Do you have the list?
Marilyn Mallinson,
No, I signed on the list that I was not speaking.
I'm sorry, on this one it doesn't say that. Edward Tabassi.
I'm here just to read. No comment.
You're reading from the
Wrong list.
No, this one says please sign in if you're wanting to speak. So that is the correct list.
When we were downstairs, they made everyone sign in if they wanted to come upstairs on that sheet, no matter if they wanted to speak.
Okay, well then I'm just gonna have to read through the names and go that way.
If you don't want to speak, just say, we don't want to speak. Something's wrong.
Mitchell Freeman.
Hi, my name is Mitchell Friedman. I live in Rio Rancho, and good evening to you gentlemen. I appreciate all your work on behalf of the community. I know there's going to be a lot of people talking about the various plans, and what I want to talk about just to open is that last year when we were showing up at the Sandoval County Commission meetings on the original plan, the starter plan, there was talk that the need for the starter plan was because it was too difficult for the oil and fracking companies to get their permits. They had to go through a special permit process, and it was difficult. And on September 6th in the newspaper in Carlsbad, the director of the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association, Ryan Flynn, said, "We now have more oil rigs in New Mexico than we ever have. We don't just expect this growth to continue next year, but for the next 5 years. This is sustained growth." And the reason I bring that up is that so if you start hearing noise from the oil and gas guys that if you don't pass, something like the block plan that's now the restated starter plan, or something that's just as weak, that they're not going to stay in business. I think that they're full of it. They're talking out of both sides of their mouths. They're doing great right now. They're popping champagne for us. And when I think about the two citizen plans, the reason why I think the Feldblum plan makes much more sense overall is that it's the only one that really consistently takes into account the needs of the community. It really looks at the permit process all the way through, and it's the only one that really wants to have environmental insurance, because the flip side of all this champagne cork popping is that the New York Times had an article just 3 weeks ago as well, saying that a lot of these fracking companies are horribly overvalued because the financiers that value them on the basis of the value of the land, not anything else. So let's look at all that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That's terrible.
There's the IT lady.
Timer's up, so get rid of public
Water technology.
Lou Fisher.
Mr. Chairman, I'd appreciate it if the clock would start when I sit down.
Don't worry, I'm watching you and I'm watching the clock.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Herrera and commissioners, you're doing the best job you possibly can under very difficult circumstances as you try to comply with the county commission's request to review and consider the efforts of the Citizens Working Group. I respect you and I commend you for it. This was never about trying to bypass the P&Z. It was always about bypassing this director
And now you can certainly see why, as he continues to shamelessly manipulate this process to get it where he and his puppeteers wanted to go. Completely outrageous, but fully expected. Mr. Chairman, the basic or Stoddard ordinance was already defeated 4-1, and the heavily flawed block proposal was described by Commissioner Block, the signpost, as a, quote, compromise. And it is a compromise. It compromises the health, safety, and well-being of his constituents. It's nothing more than a previously defeated ordinance with an extra coat of lipstick. Frankly, anyone who accepts financial support from the oil and gas industry should actually recuse themselves from this entire process. Mr. Chairman, this isn't about preempting or not preempting the almighty OCD. The County Commission preempted the entire state with right to work, despite promised lawsuits and objections from the state attorney general himself. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. And it certainly isn't about this director whining about his administrative difficulties if he doesn't get what he and his puppeteers want. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, this is about protecting our water supply, which sits directly above the only active, emphasis on active, geologic fault zone in North America, and one of only 4 active fault zones in the entire world. Mr. Chairman and those commissioners who want to do the right thing, the citizens have done what they were asked to do. So please send their work forward to the County Commission, and please discard this heavily flawed block proposal and its previously defeated predecessor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Scott Goulet.
That's close enough.
Sorry.
You want to begin by saying it correctly?
Oh, it's Goulet. It's Goulet. But, yeah. Mr. Chairman, Planning and Zoning Commission members, thank you for your time. My name is Scott Goulet. I speak tonight for Catherine Bruck, a candidate for Sandoval County Commission in District 1. Catherine has consistently been concerned and active as the county has worked to draft an ordinance that covers shale, oil, and gas drilling in Sandoval County. She has numerous concerns, which are based on her work and outreach in all areas of her district. Catherine asked the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider the following statements and questions about any ordinance as we try to protect our residents from harm that might occur. And to please keep in mind that we must think deeply about how any attempt at such drilling in this county might adversely affect our environment, our water, and our residents. This area is a fragile desert that rests upon a unique fractal geography that presents challenges and potential dangers. Her concerns are the following. The Commission's first and foremost challenge should be to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens and not leave those to federal or state government. That is the Planning and Zoning Commission and the County Commission. That is what they are tasked to accomplish. It is their first and foremost responsibility to the citizens of Sandoval County. There is no duty to protect oil and gas companies or corporations. They can pay the cost of review and enforcement through application and user fees, as is done by many other jurisdictions. We of course all know that this industry contributes to the revenue of the state, as does every other business and state resident. So there is no reason, none, for us to subsidize the oil and gas industry while not making sure that we are protecting the health and safety of our citizens. We must remember that water, not oil, is our most precious resource. Without water, we cannot live here. Catherine urges the Commission to do what is right and what is best for the citizens and to vote to approve the strongest possible ordinance that protects our water and provides for the health and safety of our citizens. There could be no compromise on this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Linda Hayes.
We don't have adequate environmental protections at either the state or federal level. against horizontal fracking. We just don't. That's why we need them at the county level. It's a no-brainer, guys. The purpose of any ordinance should not be to promote the profits of a corporation. It should be to protect the health and safety of the public. Now, the Stoddard, block, or baseline, whatever you want to call it, ordinances do not do this. So, in my opinion, they're fake ordinances. And these fake ordinances presume we have to sacrifice our air and water quality for the sake of economic development. It's untrue, it's fallacy. Also, the assumption of you guys that you can ignore what happens below the surface of the land and just regulate above surface construction is a cop-out. It is an attempt to promote drilling at the expense of our health and safety. I propose that these ordinances be put on the ballot for a public vote. Guess which one would not win? And guess which one would win? It should be voted on by the public, because the public is going to have to suffer if the block, Stoddard, or baseline ordinance get chosen. Here's just a list of some of the things that are lacking from the block ordinance. Safety emergency response plan, criteria for acceptance rejection of applications, public review of exploratory well applications, pre-drilling air quality and water quality measurements, aquifer protection requirements or monitoring, groundwater or surface water quality monitoring, air emission or air quality measurements, verification that operator performance as promised, noise or operational hours requirements, protection for split estate landowners, financial penalties. How can you call it ordinance if it's lacking all that? I don't know how much money you guys, or not you guys, but the commission takes for oil and gas industry.
Thank you, ma'am.
Benton Howell.
Chairman Herrera, Commission members, my name is Benton Howell. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is, like everyone else in this room, am concerned first and foremost about our drinking water. This commission was charged with drafting an ordinance that protects our water and regulates the drilling for oil and gas in Sandoval County. The commission, as a representative body of the citizens, should endeavor to create an ordinance that best serves the residents of the county, not an ordinance that best serves the oil and gas companies. We have an opportunity to create an ordinance that will provide essential protections to our citizens while still permitting oil and gas exploration in areas that are appropriate to that activity. Many of our citizens have worked hard to present information and facts about the geology of the county and the risks associated with drilling from the Albuquerque Basin. Commission staff has repeatedly stated that there are already federal and state regulations in place to provide for groundwater protection. We can't rely solely on federal and state officials to protect us. This commission and the county commission need to provide for the protection of our water. The citizens demand an ordinance that provides the strongest protections possible. There are numerous reports of groundwater contamination in the OCD Mexico database, and I will be happy to submit copies of the reports of those from it. The Rio Grande Basin provides drinking water to almost half the residents of New Mexico. We cannot err on the side of risking groundwater contamination. The revenues we derive from oil and gas are important, but not reliable. They do not outweigh our health and safety, nor will they protect our home values.
That clock was started before he ever started speaking, by the way. He lost a good 6 seconds out of that.
So, may I continue?
Be watching the circles like that.
It is time that we seriously expand our use of renewable energy and stop relying on the finite and unreliable use of fossil fuels. Let us not forget that water is our most precious resource. not oil. This commission must do what is
Okay,
right
thank you, sir.
and what is best for the citizens and vote to approve the strongest possible ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Rob Wesley.
Please sit back and think about why we even bother to enact an oil and gas ordinance. The industry tells us under OCD rules they develop safely and responsibly and know how to be safe and responsible. That's despite several self-reported spills each day in New Mexico, despite 85 San Juan Basin spills in 5 years, each of which impacted water. Despite waterway impact from an 11,000-gallon crude oil spill in Sandoval County. Despite regularly reported health impacts from air, water, and noise pollution. The OCD regulatory regime is clearly not sufficient. The regime must be augmented. The county ordinance's primary purpose, the why, is to provide incentives for operators and their employees to behave well after the permit is granted. Incentives especially for low-budget operators. Incentives to operate responsibly. Incentives not to take risks, and incentives not to cut corners. Just like we require hiring police officers to incentivize everyone to follow highway regulations. Does each ordinance provide real incentive for operators paid by the industry? Criteria to distinguish responsible from irresponsible? Regular post-permit observation to discourage hiding misbehavior?
Time.
And sufficiently large penalties to make violations really felt.
Thank you, sir.
Matt Eldrenhoff.
I'd like to thank the Commission for the opportunity to speak. My name is Matt Eldrenhoff. I'd just like to say that everyone else that's come up here has done.
Sorry.
Okay, that's about 4 seconds. Everyone else that's come up here has done a much better job of describing what I was going to talk to than I could have. So I want to remember certain individuals sitting on this commission that want to talk about, I'll go there, law and order and criminality. I want to remind individuals on this commission that in the United States now, corporations are equal to citizens. So corporations should be equally held accountable as citizens are. Corporations such as criminals hate conservative judges. Corporations, citizens. That's the only way that you keep violations from occurring. And also, but you know what, I will go into one of the violations here. And what they talk about, the minimum amount on the last page. Essentially, they don't even give an amount on here. The last ordinance, at least they put an amount down there for a violation. There's not even an amount there. $50 for a variance on an oil and gas site. $250 to drill a well. And of course the argument is, well, they have to do the paperwork and everything. Well, the counter argument is you're putting all of that all the way on higher regulatory agencies. I mean, do you get it, quite frankly? Do you understand it? And I guarantee you, there will be blowback, gentlemen. Do you understand what the concept of blowback is? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, we have a representative from the Hickory Apache. He wasn't here on time, but he wants to speak. Will you guys allow this?
I think that'd be okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time pronouncing it.
You're in Bernalillo County, a Spanish name. My name is Guillermo Alejandro de Herrera. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, for being late, and members. I didn't calculate the distance from Dulce, New Mexico to Bernalillo with sufficient time. I'm here, my name is Guillermo D. Herrera. I'm the Director of Oil and Gas for the Hickory Apache Nation. President Posada sends his regards and asked me to come here and represent the nation in regard to oil and gas development. I want to speak about two things briefly, if I can do it within 2 minutes.
You're not.
Oh, really? Oh, well, thank God. I was trying to think of what can I say in 2 minutes to make an impact. So let me begin by saying that I want to talk about two things. One of them is perspective on a global level as well as a local level. And the perspective on a global level, obviously we're involved in oil and gas in some fashion. You're on the regulatory side. And that's one of my jobs as well, as on the regulatory side. The other perspective is locally, and that is Sandoval County. In the Hickory Apache Nation, 20% of the nation's land sits in Sandoval County. And that is primarily where we have 100,000 acres ready for development. Then, as you may well know, right south of there in Sandoval County is federal leases that are going to come up in November. That's 40,000 acres. So Hickory lands, or tribal lands, Pueblo lands, and also federal lands are not subject to this jurisdiction. They will still be involved, and that development is going to occur based on federal law, in our case, Hickory Apache law. By the way, I forgot to mention something in the beginning. I appreciate the fact that you have allowed the Pueblos and the Indian tribes the respect of putting in your agenda government to government. We are an independent, sovereign nation, the Hickory are. I'm not a tribal member, but I represent them. And so thank you for giving the Native Americans, our indigenous brethren, the respect for being government to government in terms of their response. So back to the local perspective, you got to put this in context of what is your ordinance, what is Sandoval County ordinance is with not regard to federal lands and not regard to the tribal lands. You have no jurisdiction, or your ordinance will have no jurisdiction on the Indian lands, okay? On a larger scale, global perspective, in my opinion, putting aside my representation of the Hickory Apache Nation, the environmentalists are very astute, smart, and wanting to stop all fossil fuels. But I wouldn't guarantee it. I would suspect that the majority of the people that drove here on their automobiles using gasoline. When the country is ready to make a change to renewable energy or some other form of energy, fossil fuels is going to go away because there will have been something in between. But until that happens, we're going to need it. You go to any of the major cities, it is filled with cars. They're not stopping anywhere else. So we cannot stop the fossil fuels anytime soon. What I tell the Hickory is, listen, at some point, your oil and gas in the ground, and we have a lot of it, by the way, It's in the Mango Shale, and we're beginning the development process to extract that fossil fuel, that oil primarily. So I say to the Higuerillas, listen, at some time your resources are going to be worthless. Now, it may not happen in my lifetime, but it's going to happen at some point if this country ever gets serious about finding an alternative source of energy. All our oil and gas will be worthless. Maybe a little bit for plastics and so forth for the pharmaceutical industry or whatever, but at some point oil and gas, we will have to have a different source of energy. But this country is not ready for that. They're not doing that. We could be, China and many of these other countries are already going completely neutral. No fossil fuels. You've heard of Sweden. You've heard of these other countries. We're not even close to doing that. Whether it's federal, presidential, whatever, state, we're not ready to take that leap. I think maybe we should. But until that happens, the Native Americans, the Jicarilla Apache, deserve to develop their resources. You know, it's ironic that the Indian nations were put on lands that were, at that point, worthless. Nobody anticipated, but it wasn't a fair thing. They said, here's your reservation. Now we're finding oil and gas, and now you want to cut off the development for fossil fuels? Hello. We want to develop our resources. The nation has a right to do that, and until the United States of America is ready to change their energy source, we should be able to develop that. Again, that's putting it in perspective, not that your ordinance necessarily will have that. I don't want to take more of your time. I apologize for being late. I'm certain that you will find a fine line between development and still taking the concerns for the environmental community. We do, on the nation, we have old infrastructure. We've been developing gas there for 60 years, and it does leak. There are rusted pipes and so forth, and we attack it real quickly. We do not want, the nation is very conservative in this regard, any spills, any damage to the aquifers. We are the first ones there on the industry trying to clean up the environment after a spill. But that's going to be normal. Let me say one final thing on the fracking. That's, in the last 10 years fracking has started. We are now the #1 producer in the world in fossil fuels or in energy. That is an unbelievable situation that we find ourselves in because America's innovation, technology, and science, that's how we're advancing that industry. And oil and gas is the first one. There's continuing to make those advancements. But do not be afraid of fracking. It is the surface stuff that's contaminating the shallow aquifers. It is not the deep 1 mile down. What we're doing on the reservation is making sure that the industry also uses that produced water because, as you well know, we live in a desert. It is very dry around here. We need every drop of water. And the produced water, instead of putting it back in the ground, we are requiring the industry to reuse it as part of the requirement for hydraulic or fracking. So the industry, in my opinion, has been, with due regard to the environment, I think we take care of the situation as we need to. And so I'm not concerned about the industry doing the violations. I do believe that there should be some regulatory, and I'm sure you'll find that fine line. Everybody needs to follow some rules. We have rules on the reservation, but at the same time, the industry, I think, is cognizant of their responsibility and produce oil and gas in the best way they can. Mr. Chairman, I would be glad to answer some questions if you have some. If not, I will excuse myself, and again, pardon me for being late.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Yeah, Mr. Tejeda, I'm concerned in your experience, which I'm sure is quite vast in the oil and gas industry. It may not be where you actually drill in the Jicarilla area, but in the industry in general, are there those
drillers that we really have to watch out for. I keep hearing this, that the big boys don't want to make any error. They don't want to have problems. But I think what we have to do is focus on the little companies that can turn around, as we all know, and start a new company almost the next day. So can you give me some comment and your insight and educate us, okay?
I think if there were no regulations, the industry would run amok. But there is regulations. You have the OCD, which is very efficient in this state. We do have that problem with mom and pops, the lower economic companies that are in there, and I have been struggling with some of these lower end economic companies. The bigger ones, no, man, they are right on top of it. They want no image problem. They want no complaints from us, which we issue if we need to. But on the smaller ones, yes, I would say that you have to be careful with that, and I hope your regulation provides for that. But that's mostly economic, and the danger with them is generally on the surface. That's where we see the problem on the reservation. And when I say the industry would run amok, I spent 10 years in the Middle East, working in Iraq, living with the Arabs, and if the industry had no regulations, it can be disastrous for the community and for the people in that area. But that's why you're here. That's what government is intended to do, protect the public. So I'm trusting that you will protect the industry as well as, not protect the industry, but allow the industry to develop its resources, whether they're private, government, state-owned, public, federal government, or Hickory Apache Nation tribal members. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it does.
Mr. Chairman? Sir. Do you have any ordinances on the Hickory that you all follow when an industry comes in? Is there some kind of guidelines that you have?
Absolutely. We have what's called Title 18, which is the code. The Hickory Apache Nation has a full set of codes for everything. The judicial, we have another code, Title 14, for the EPO, which is Environmental Protection Office. Then we have the rev and tax for collecting the revenues and so forth. But Title 18 is the one that I'm the director of and responsible for. And on that part, there's two parts. The regulatory side, which is leaks, roads, erosion, all of the things. And then, of course, we've adopted the BLM regs, and then we have the BIA as a trustee. So we have, let me put it bluntly, a lot of regulations on the Hickory Apache Nation, and part of it is regulatory to keep the industry in check, and then the other half of Title 18 is to provide for the development of the natural resources of the nation, and that's what we're involved in right now, is trying to get some development going so that we can become entirely self-sufficient at some point. That's our hope.
Thank you. And could you do us one favor before we leave? Make sure we have a contact information in case we have any questions. I'd appreciate it.
Certainly.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
AM, and I'm having a hard time reading the last name. Basie.
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you very much for allowing me to come and speak. I have two statements to make, both brief and both pertinent. The first statement is a question. As I understand it, the county commissioners directed this board to present them with one ordinance for oil and gas. Is that correct?
They directed us to make a recommendation. They didn't restrict us to how many.
They didn't restrict you to how many?
No.
So the plan to give them 4 ordinances is what's on the table right now, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So my request is that you combine the ordinances, specifically the ordinances from the Citizens Working Group, which I also believe the county commissioners established, correct? My request is that you combine those two ordinances let go of the Stoddard Amendment because it was already defeated, and send one ordinance to the county commissioners so that we can move this process forward for the benefit of everybody, including you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ursula Shepherd.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to start out by saying this is a pretty exciting process, actually, and we should be rather pleased with ourselves that we are engaging in what Commissioner Adang talked about last time about Jeffersonian democracy and about moving forward with a community decision about what we're doing. I think that's a really important thing. I also am very troubled by the way in which this has been addressed in terms of your mandate. My understanding was that your mandate was to come forward having accomplished two things: to bring forward a citizens ordinance that had deep citizen involvement and engagement in it, and to protect our water sources. I'm not going to talk to you about which of those ordinances that you're looking at is the correct one. But I am going to say to you, at the time of the last meeting, Mr. Stamp, you suggested that you didn't want to get rid of some of your options, that you thought there could be good things in all of those things. My argument to you would be, or my suggestion to you would be, if that's what you think, do the job of this committee and determine what those are and get them into the ordinance, into one ordinance. You, Mr. Brown, came up with the idea that there was too much information in one of those ordinances and that should be taken care of. That seems to me to be the job of this committee at this point. Which ordinance fits all of your needs and goes forward? I'm not telling you which of these ordinances is the right one. I have my views about which is the right one. But your job was to go forward to make life easier for the commission. Instead, what you're putting forward is something which means we'll all be at 2 a.m. meetings again in the next thing. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time to speak.
Thank you.
Anne Marie.
That's me. I already spoke.
Sonia Benson.
Good evening. My name is Sonia Benson, and I am a Sandoval County resident. And I live here and I work here, and I built my own house, literally with my own hands here. And I am here today to ask you to push both of the Citizens Working Group ordinances forward to the county commissioners. And when I listened to the meetings or the minutes of the previous meeting concerning this, I heard concerns that it was very repetitive. And it was just too much, and it was taken care of already through OCD and state laws. So listening to that, I did a search, and I found that the OCD laws, they're there, and the state laws are there, but since 2011, the enforcements of them have drastically gone down, while drilling and oil and gas production has drastically gone up. And that was a New Mexico political report from February of last year, and it was an Albuquerque Journal report from around the same time last year. So while they're there, they're just not enforced. And that's what the Citizens Working Group's ordinances would provide, which is important for our water protection. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take 5 minutes. We'll take 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll start again. Good.
Bryce Benson.
Can you hear me? Hello, my name is Bryce Benson. I am 9 years old, and I plan on growing up here and living here when I grow up. Please do what you can to keep my water, air, and environment clean and healthy. Thank you.
Alan Friedman.
I don't think you're going to get an applause, Alan. You go from the young side. Good evening, all. Commissioner Herron, Chairman Herron, Commissioners. Earlier this year, when the Citizens Working Group was established to develop an oil and gas ordinance to protect our water, the County Commission asked you guys, the Planning and Zoning Commission, to review that ordinance before it was passed up to the County Commission for a vote. Clearly, the process did not work out that simply. And the CWG developed two good ordinances that provide alternative frameworks, a positive step in the right direction. But then Commissioner Block threw another ordinance into the mix. And confound things further, several meetings ago, Director Springfield talked about you having to deal with five ordinances that I remember. So I guess today you consider it four. Over the last 5 to 6 months, ordinary citizens like yourselves on the CWG ordinance team spent literally thousands of hours working on this ordinance. We had listening meetings in Peña Blanca, the East Mountain, 3 meetings in Cuba. We conferred with the Sandoval County tribes and pueblos. We've gotten outside legal input, ordinance team members engaged in serious research. Jeff Selesky on insurance issues, Jani and Jerry Dussault on roads and livestock, Donna Dow on air quality, Steve Palmer, Robert Marchand, and Denise Forrest worked on noise. I personally consulted with the previous OCD director, current and retired OCD geologist, scientists at New Mexico Tech, a former EPA Water Division director, retired petroleum engineers, and petroleum geologists. So we've done a lot of work. Recently, representatives from the CWG science team and the EWG ordinance team met to try and merge the two ordinances. There's much in common in both ordinances. There are some good choices to be made that should go before the county commission, an overall approach that the county commissioners should decide. It now makes sense for you, the
Time.
thank you, to send up two of the citizen working group ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Gregory Bergmark.
I would just turn over your bike. Push the button. Push the button. Oh, okay. Push it. One more. There it is.
Just like to bring up an important point that I think can't be brought enough, and that's the Rio Grande Rift has never been horizontally fractured before. Neither has any rift in this country or anywhere else that I know of been horizontally fractured. And based on the science and geology, it could be classified as an abnormally hazardous activity for the citizens of this county. And I just wanted to bring that up because people talk about it in relation to commonly done fracturing in the rest of the state or in the country. It's not like what would happen here should that be done in this geology. It's much more dangerous. So that's about all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Craig Barth.
Are you guys together?
Yeah, he's disabled right now, he lost his voice.
I see.
So I'm reading his comments.
Okay.
Craig Barth. He lives in Coachella Lake.
Can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. His name is Craig Barth. He lives in Coachella Lake. Over 2 months ago, I handed each of you a copy of the movie Sacred Land, Sacred Water. It didn't look like a movie since it was stored on a thumb drive. I hope each of you has taken the opportunity of viewing the 48-minute documentary. The film gives a nice summary of what happened last summer and fall, leading up to the Sandoval County Commission's vote on December 14 on what was termed the Stoddard Ordinance. The movie also gives an overview of the subsurface geology of the Rio Grande Rift and the Albuquerque Basin, insight into the vulnerability of the aquifer underlying the basin is what led 4 out of 5 county commissioners to vote against the Stoddard Ordinance. A lot has happened since last December. In a joint meeting with the county commissioners on July 12th, you heard 2 scientists for hire by Thrust Energy attack the science which has been meticulously researched by a team of experienced geologists and which is presented in Sacred Land, Sacred Water. Thrust agents claim that faults in the Rio Grande Rift are self-sealing and are not likely to transport fracking fluids upwards into the aquifer. And 2, that the aquifer underlying the Albuquerque Basin is not continuous, but is instead broken up into many isolated aquifers. Both of these claims are unfounded. First, it is important to remember that we are in an active continental rift valley, which is under constant tectonic pressure from deep within the earth. This immense pressure keeps faults, like undressed saber cuts, always bleeding, always open. Fracking fluids will flow up through these open faults if drill cores penetrate them. Second, reams of publications from UNM and from
Time.
New Mexico Tech.
They started, they missed 50 seconds.
And
No, I guess
we
we can
counted for
25
that.
seconds.
We counted.
4 minutes?
Just 2 minutes now.
No, you said.
Yes,
You
I'm
have
calling
2
you
minutes
up.
each. You have your own speech,
No, I don't.
then that's, you have 2
I'm
minutes.
just reading. Yeah.
Great, then you have 2 minutes.
She can have my time.
We can't
Oh,
do
we're not
that.
doing that, ma'am.
That's contrary to rules.
She's almost done.
If I had known that, I would have planned it differently, because I did speak. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Brenda Sinfield.
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Brenda Sinfield, and I'm living in Corrales at this present time. I've been very interested in this for the past couple of years. I've only lived here 2.5 years. I came from many places, Canada, New York, and the Virgin Islands. There's an elephant in the room here we're not even talking about, and that's global warming. It's something that is happening right now. So I hope you take that with a grain of salt, because it's important when you're making these decisions that you're thinking on a global level. If you can't make the decision, get an environmental assessment done, because right now we are in a rift. We are in a place where it's tectonically fragile, and what we do now matters, and it'll matter today, next year, 20 years from now, and 100 years from now. We have to take this seriously. It's not something to just, oh, you know, it's okay. You know, we'll make a mistake, we'll repair it. We can't repair it. It's too big. So I ask that you take this in consideration. The federal and state regulations are not working. We have a plume of methane gas the size of Delaware in Farmington. State regulations aren't working. I've spoke to Mr. Griswold, who's the OCD environmental chief. He has 5 people for 40,000 wells. They don't even test water wells near gas wells. That's not happening right now. So really, where the buck stops, it's here. We have to do what we can do to help the people and keep them safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm having a hard time reading this next name, but I believe it's Dick
Palmer.
Palmer.
Commissioners, thank you for the time, thank you for all the effort that you're putting into trying to do the right thing for our constituencies here. This is important, and it is about the water. I'm here this evening, I'm Dick Ulmer from Cedars, but I'm also the Vice President of the Eastern Sandoval County Citizens Association. Representing our membership is on the far side of the interstate, and we depend on the Albuquerque Basin for our water out there. We have taken, as an organization, a position that there should be no fracking in the Albuquerque Basin, and we would ask this group to only consider ordinances that indeed make that the case. We've fully supported, bought in to the expertise and geological evidence that Don Phillips has presented here and to many of us. We believe there's a real danger, and we need your help to make sure that the ordinance that goes forward keeps fracking out of the Albuquerque Basin. Two Citizens Working Group ordinances meet that criteria. The block or the others, I still don't know whether there's 2 or 3 others or how many, but there's only 2 that meet our criteria. And personally, as an old software exec, if I had my way, I'd lock those 2 committee groups in a room and send in pizza until they came out with one. Thank you.
David Craig.
Hello, Chairman Herrera, Commissioners. My name is David Craig. I'm from the town of Cochise Lake. I'm also a...
Can't hear you, sir.
Sorry, can you hear me better now? Yes. Yeah, hello, Chairman Herrera, Commissioners. My name is David Craig from the town of Cochise Lake. I'm also a Citizens Working Group member. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you also for not canceling this meeting at the last minute. That's directed to all of you and Springfield over there. Thank you for not posting the most recent Citizens Working Group ordinance on the county's meeting website. I ask that you please reject the industry-friendly Stoddard Block Baseline Ordinance. I ask that you support the Citizens Working Group Ordinance, which truly protect the county water, people's health, welfare, and safety, and Native American water, cultural and historic areas, including those on ancient Native American lands that no longer are within the tribal boundaries. The CWG ordinances also support responsible oil and gas extraction. I think that's a critical point to make. These ordinances are not anti-oil, anti-gas. I also ask that all of you please do what is right and not just convenient. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Jerry DeSalle.
Commissioner Herrera, Commissioners, my name is Jerry Dussault. I live in Corrales. We are still confronted with the block ordinance and now a new P&Z staff created based on the ordinance. But is it necessary at this time to consider either of these? The two CWG ordinances already provide a strong and solid base from which to build an even stronger and more responsible ordinance that is fair to both Sandoval County and the oil and gas industry. I am truly troubled and I'm angry. This whole process of creating and submitting ordinances that do not address or fulfill the charge, excuse me, or fulfill the charge of the county commissioners of making numerous end runs around the agreed upon process is making a mockery of this process and clearly is making your responsibilities more difficult as well as contentious. Director Springfield, let your ego go. Quit playing petty politics. Enacting a responsible oil and gas ordinance is not about you. It's not about satisfying the oil and gas industry. It's not a decision about making it easy for you and your staff to administer. You already have two strong CWG ordinances in play that are both fair to the oil and gas interests and to the welfare of Sandoval County. I respectfully request the following. Help push these CWG ordinances forward. Facilitate rather than hinder their being melded into one effective ordinance and then enact them into law. You may be surprised how good you look at that.
Thank you, sir.
Janny Dussault?
Commissioner Herrera and Commissioners, my name is Jenny Dussault, and I also live in Corrales. With the ordinance that are before you, I have some questions for you that I would ask you to honestly answer. Have I carefully reviewed all the ordinances? Do I understand what each ordinance is addressing? Do I understand the differences? Do I have questions about the ordinances? What regulations and procedures are needed to reasonably protect both the oil and gas industry and the water, air, and quality of life for all residents? Am I prepared to determine now which ordinance or ordinances we will recommend to the County Commission? If not, what additional information do I need to make an informed decision? These are questions I'm asking you to think through carefully. Do I know, in other words, do you know, or at least truly believe that the ordinances I am recommending to go forward to the County Commission will protect the water, air, property values, and quality of life, potentially affecting well over 1/3 of all the people living in New Mexico? If an oil and gas company applied to drill in my neighborhood, would I want to know about this and have the right to a public hearing about this application, regardless of what part of the county I live in? Only the Citizens Working Group with Citizens Ordinance contains that provision. Unlike what Mike Springfield has implied, the oil and gas industry is highly complex, and so are the issues surrounding it. Ease of administration that Mike has requested should not be a primary factor when selecting an ordinance. Please make sure that your decision is an informed, thoughtful, carefully considered one that you can live with and do right for all the residents of Sandoval County and the Albuquerque Metro. Thank you.
Matthew Elder, I can't pronounce the last name, can't read the writing. E-L-D-E-E? Mike Swick.
He's not here.
Craig Barth. Elaine Semina.
One thing is certain and a common denominator. The legacy of pollution and the allowed decay of infrastructure, along with habitat loss and the ultimate pollution, global warming, leaves us hell on earth. And New Mexico is signing its economic and social death warrant. And the Sandoval County, with this ordinance, putting profit before people, with a push for poisoning our water, air, health, and public safety. The future does not belong to the depleted, to the polluted, to the abandoned, and to the bankrupt. When the land is sick, the people get sick, and then the children leave, and they should. I request the following, that there's no artificial boundaries that put disparate impacts on tribal communities and people of color in this ordinance. Do not use raw bromine to frack with because you're going to drain the Rio Grande. I ask you to use the language that was given in the Citizens Working Group and both of these ordinances together and come up with one good ordinance. And quit jerking us around that you're going to be poisoning us because you're going to ruin our water if you do anything less. I asked the county to formally enter into a tribal consultation process as well. And I don't believe that they have done that in the full sense of the matter. So I thank you for hearing me out tonight. I ask you to look at the public comments because I've been posting them there. And what I have to say is in there.
Time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sally Hall.
Hi, my name is Sally Hall. I live in Peña Blanca. And I really appreciate that we have had a citizens working group working on this. I'm grateful that we as a county are trying to practice democracy. I support the citizens working group ordinance. I'm responding to the listening session that came to Peña Blanca, so the information I got came from there. People are not numbers. To frack or drill for oil and gas in the canyons of the Jemez, Peralta, Cochiti, and Bland would be an abuse of land, culture, water, and beauty. This land is sacred to me. I have been hiking and painting in these canyons for 30 years. I can only imagine what it would be like to grow up here and to have ancestors that have lived here from ancient times. We are in a position to change history. We could be pioneers, a county that took a threat to our way of living and turned it into a solution, an example for the world. The economy is not a good reason to ruin our water. Civilizations end from greed and overuse of resources. Towards the end, people become insignificant due to the obsession with wealth and power. Wildlife deserve the land that has become isolated due to fire and flood. Let's leave the land alone to let it repair. Water flows downhill. Let's protect our watershed for present and future life. Thank you.
Martha N. Berg.
Martha Ingberg, and I'm from Food and Water Watch New Mexico. I'm here representing our organization and our membership of over 13,000 in the state, and many of whom live in Sandoval County. The fact that you are considering recommending anything other than what was before you by the Citizens Working Group is a disgrace. The block ordinance is just a version of the previously voted down ordinance, and it is equally as weak. It doesn't address the risks that can come with resource extraction activities and takes away the ability for county residents to have any input in addressing these risks. Risks to their homes, their families, their communities, their health, and their environment. Even the way these meetings are being held and run seems to be an attempt to prevent the public from being able to fully engage on the issues. Procedural justice demands public policy be created and based on mutual respect and justice for everyone. The right to equal participation in all phases of decision making. It is outrageous that you would recommend an ordinance that treats certain areas of the county any differently. Any potential for negative impacts on any citizen's health or drinking water is absolutely unacceptable. We will not tolerate zoning in the county to make certain areas the main targets for these negative impacts. We're not willing to risk any of our precious little water from an industry that is on its way out. We must move forward on a path that creates and allows environmentally sustainable and culturally appropriate economic development. Don't support an ordinance because of ease of implementation. This will move us in the opposite direction of the way that we need to go. The creation of the Citizens Working Group happened because it's what people wanted. An ordinance that contains strong guaranteed protections for the drinking water and public health of all residents.
Thank you.
If you really feel that you want to recommend the other 4 weak legislation, we'll fight it and we will never drop it. Your decisions impact the future, my generation, and those after me. Thank you.
Carolyn Horn.
Good evening. New Mexico is in a drought. In this part of the country, water is life, and we don't have water to waste or pollute. According to facts on fracking, 2 to 8 million gallons of water, and possibly more, are needed per well. Road wear will occur because the water has to be hauled in by truck and the wastewater hauled out. Who will be responsible for paying to repair the roads? What chemicals will be used? Will the responsible party pay for spills? And where will the wastewater be disposed of? Second, climate change is no longer in dispute. Fossil fuels speed up climate change, and fossil fuels are finite. I am concerned about the ability of the world to support life in the future and believe it's time to change to renewable energy. A recent report by the International Renewable Energy Agency states that renewables will be consistently cheaper than fossil fuels by as soon as 2020. So far, 51 U.S. cities have joined the campaign to convert to 100% renewable energy, and 5 are already there. Third, the Planning and Zoning Commission is supposed to represent the people of Sandoval County. However, your allegiance seems to be with the Republican Party and people who don't care about how much destruction they cause to our climate and environment, but only about how much money they can make. I urge you to stop new fossil fuel projects and start making a transition to renewables. As concerned citizens, we can all make ourselves heard by cutting off the flow of money to the fossil fuel industry, one investor at a time. We can pull our cash from banks like Bank of America and Wells Fargo and divest from investments that support fossil fuel industries.
Thank you,
And
ma'am.
in November, we can say no by our vote.
Nancy Weeks. Jamie Gallardo.
Good evening, Mr. Commissioner, Commissioners, thank you. So I just want to say, I was here that night when the commission had oil and gas and right to work on the agenda. Needless to say, it was a very long night. But I was proud of the commission for two things that night. Number one, that they created the Citizens Working Group, and number two, that they voted in favor of right to work. Because it showed to me, and obviously to the state, that Sandoval County is, bold. We are bold. And, there are things that may not be, politically correct, depending on your perspective, depending on your spectrum. But I think, I was just very proud that night. And especially for the fact that what they said that night was, with the Citizens Working Group and creating that group, because they heard the people. The people came and they spoke, and it was very clear, and they did that. And for me, it said that, let's do something for the people, by the people. And that is America, That's what makes this country great, and democracy, and hearing the people. And that's exactly what happened. It happened that night. It happened in the thousands of hours that were spent on both sides, whether you're on the industry or the other side. But I think it's important that we go back to what happened that night, because it was a very historic night on many levels. And I think if we can just follow what happened that night, we'll be all right. That's just my opinion. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Patricia Lewis. Isaac Asepa.
Hi, thank you all so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is Isaac Asefa. I was born and raised here in Rio Rancho. I graduated from Rio Rancho High in 2016. Sorry I'm a little messy. I'm a farmer now, so that's really awesome, something I love to do. And so something from my farm, I will never use chemicals that will harm anybody on my food, and I think that's so important. So I really hope that there will be no malicious chemicals in our community. These health consequences are real for me because I want to raise my family here, as well as my younger brothers and my family. So I say no fracking in Sandoval County. Let's move towards renewable energies. Thank you all so much.
Mark LeClaire.
Good evening, thank you for hearing my comments tonight. I was trying to keep this focused. We're all here together right now because we're participating in this democracy, and it's our common heritage. We all share that. And I believe it's the strength of our government that we have a system of checks and balances that prevent one person or one department maybe from having too much power. It's these checks and balances that allow the voice of the community to be heard. I think that you are those checks and balances, gentlemen. And I just want to urge you, because we're at the crossroads right now, and we couldn't move forward up till now. How has the legislation been coming down the pipe? Dick Cheney created most of the legislation that applies to fracking. The CEO of Halliburton, right here in our own state, the former CEO of WPX, the biggest fracker in charge of the New Mexico Mineral Energy Environment Department. We have an opportunity right now, a beautiful opportunity, to let the voice of the citizens, the people that actually live here, be heard. We could move in a different direction right now. And I hope that you gentlemen will have the courage to push us a step forward on that path. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Herrera, that concludes the public comment.
No, I was on the list.
I have these lists here.
I signed it.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, I signed it
Sign down the
downstairs.
stairs list.
It doesn't matter, Mary, come on up.
Oh, thank you. I think
Put
you
you on
guys
my
know
list.
me.
Yeah. Put you on the VIP list, how about that?
Oh, do I get 10 minutes in? Well, I was 9 years old many decades ago. We were in Cuba 3 times with the ordinance team group. And I want to tell you that people there were first suspicious, and then all of a sudden, some of them who worked in the oil industry said, we thought you guys were anti-oil and gas. Now we realize that's not true. And many of them told us the rules that their companies have to abide by as BLM lands, closed loop systems, sound barriers. I could go on and on. I mean, it was really fascinating to hear their experiences. And you know, this industry is a very high-risk industry. It's a very volatile industry. And it is really important to have good rules. I think the Hickory Apache have excellent rules. In fact, you told me about them, I think, Mr. Chairman. And